Here's a real-world application for using the ladder stitch. I have this dress that I'm altering, and it has ties in the front, but when they're tied, it still feels immodest. And so I was asked to kind of close that up a little bit more securely than just the ties, because as they're tied, you can see, put some fabric behind here, you can see still just a little bit of a gap. That is not something that she was terribly comfortable with. So we're going to actually, we want to keep the ties because we like that feature, but we're going to close it so that it's just a little bit more modest. So instead of taking all of this work out, we're going to just close the seam a little closer with the machine. This is actually a faster job to just ladder stitch this opening closed. So I found some thread that matches pretty closely, and I'm going to get an arm's length here and thread my needle. You don't want more than an arm's length of thread though at a time, because you can really, it gets tangled much easier, and it actually slows you down when you're fighting tangles all the time. So I'm going to show you how to, we're going to thread the needle here. Instead of holding it like this so there's a long length here of thread, I'm going to make it so that there's hardly any showing at all between my fingers. And then I just put the eye of my needle over top of that little speck of thread, and then unpinch my fingers, and then it's in the needle. So that's a pretty fast way of threading it. And I'm also going to use some thread conditioner so that it kind of cuts down on tangles as I'm working here. If you don't have any, you can just skip that step. Knot it. And then inside, we're going to actually start at the bottom of this seam, and we're going to hide our tail here. So I think we're going to go in about right here, kind of underneath this bias tape, but not through the fabric on the front. So under the bias, and then I'm going to come out right, I want to come out right here with my needle. There we go. Okay, so that's where I'm going to pull through, and now my knot is hidden there instead of up here where the tails could come through. And I'm going to trim my tails just a little bit shorter. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my work here sideways. I am right-handed, so I work from right to left when I do the ladder stitch, but you can do what is comfortable for you. And you want to make sure that these ties are kind of out of the way, so I think I'm going to pin them away so that they don't accidentally get tangled in my stitches. Just kind of pin them off to the side. Okay, so I'm going to turn my work inside out again. And then you can kind of see where the ruching is, and you can line those up pretty easily like that. So here is the ladder stitch. Remember, the ladder stitch, we work inside the tunnel of the seam allowance, not one side or the other of the fabric. So here I am right here, just going to go in right here on the other side, because my needle's on this side of the seam. So I'm going to put my needle in on the other side, right directly across from where my needle came out before. I'm just going to go into that tunnel. Might be a little thick for a second. Okay, and where my needle came out, I'm going to make the ladder rung and just go directly across and go in to this space here. So instead of now working in the bias tape, I'm going to actually move slightly more toward the front and go in right here in this tunnel so that my stitches are more invisible, but also more toward the front of the garment. Okay, so I've got that already. So if I pull that, that should close. And I want fairly short stitches, so I don't want to go like 1/4 of an inch apart or anything. So where my stitch came out on this side, on the bottom half, I'm going to go in directly across on the top half, just small bites. You don't really want to take longer stitches than that, because then they'll still have a space between that you can see through. Okay, directly across on the bottom. So now we've come to these ties. We're just going to treat the ties like the rest of the fabric. Pretend they're part of the tunnel. Just put your needle into them also. They'll be inside the new seam. Okay, so directly across into the tie again. So if you go into the tie, you also want to make sure that you're going through the rest of this also. You want to go through this tunnel also. So it might be a little bit thicker for a minute. So do you see the rungs of my ladder so far? And if I just pull gently, they come together. So I'm just going to do this all the way across until I get to the top of this opening of the neckline. So you're working in the tunnel, not on one side or the other of the fabric, and then your stitches will stay invisible if you're inside the tunnel. You're just mimicking that machine stitch without taking out all of these other seam covers. Got a bubble, just pull it out. Just move across. See, I'm right here, so directly across is where I want to go in. Directly across. Just say that to yourself the whole time. So up here is kind of where my neckline is starting to open, but I'm just going to pretend like it's not trying to scoop. And I'm going to go a little bit straighter right there. So once I get there, I'll show you. So instead of continuing like this rounded edge, we're actually going to move the tunnel more to here, and we're going to stitch here instead of this top part of the seam. So let me do a couple more stitches on the straight line here. Then we have to kind of go off the curve and make our own straight line. Again, you do not want really long stitches. You want to keep them nice and short. Okay, here's where it's starting to curve. So I'm going to go, so instead of being up here, I'm actually going to be creating my own tunnel right here in between these layers. I'm going to go straight. So you don't want it to be an abrupt change, so you just kind of start tapering down. Next stitch is a little bit further down. It's tempting to go really long stitches. Okay, I came out here, so I'm going to go a little bit further down on the next one. If you need to kind of push this open a little bit, you can to see where you're going. Going to go a little bit lower again so we can get our straight going, our straight line. You just kind of have to eyeball a straight line, or you can draw it too if you'd like. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit lower than the last one on this side, in between all these layers. We're not going through either side. Okay, so we're coming near my ties. And so since I pinned them out of the way, they're sort of trying to angle up and over, but I actually want to make sure that they're straight in where they would be in the end. So you can put a pin there if you want to keep them. We just want them to be straight across. We're not trying to change their placement. But so we want to keep it where it is before we stitch there. Okay, we're going to continue this little path. Now I'm into the tie, so I just want to make sure that the tie is exactly where it needs to be, and then go into part of the tie with my stitch. Same thing, grab part of the tie. Now we're going to go through the tie and the other layer. So we're coming up to the end of this ruffle, and I believe that's where we had it marked to stop. So we're actually going to just kind of work our way to a stop here. So how do we stop the ladder stitch? So now you're going to go directly across, but now you're going to go the other direction, go back into what you just did. I'm actually gonna, since this is the top of a neckline, I'm gonna go backwards a few stitches here and go across, make it nice and secure. So the ties really aren't being, the stitches that we're putting through the ties are not really weight-bearing stitches. They're not really going to be as structural as the stitches holding the ties in from the machine, but you do want them to be fairly strong. You don't want your ladder stitch to break just because you used your ties. I turned my work upside down now, so I'm kind of working backwards now. Okay, I think this is a good place to tie off. One more stitch, and then I just do another stitch right in a row here. Grab a chunk of fabric. That makes our loop number 1. Okay, put your needle into loop number 1, keeping loop number 2, close loop number 1, loop number 2 and 3, and close them both. I like to do that 2 times in a row. Grab another bite of fabric here in the same spot you knotted loop number 1, needle in, hold loop number 2, close loop number 1, loop number 3, and close loop number 2 and 3 together. A couple of tugs. And I'm going to hide my tail by going into my tunnel again one more time and coming out somewhere else. Basically, it just doesn't have to be, you just want to come out somewhere else. And then you'll cut it down here. So then we will press this so that it's nice and flat. And you can still use the ties, but it doesn't show more than what's wanted to be showing. That's the ladder stitch in the real world application.